Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hello, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening. Who knows? Who knows what time of day it is? But welcome, everyone. I just want to make sure that my feed comes up okay and that everybody can hear me okay. Welcome to the first session of Copic 101. I'm so excited to be hosting this class. Hello. Lots of you guys are already here, ready to start coloring and learning all about our markers. Yay. All right. Yay. Awesome. I'm hearing good morning and that you're hearing me okay. Fabulous. Just a reminder, there is still a slight delay in your comments coming through to me and the video feed. So, again, just a heads up. If it takes me a minute to answer your questions, I see Shari is in the chat. And I saw my friend Josie's here. Hello, Josie. So, and I believe Brienne is going to be here. Brienne and Shari are usually pretty fabulous at posting links for certain things that I'm talking about. Although neither of them are required to do that, I do appreciate when they do. And then my friend Josie is going to be starting to, well, she kind of already has started to work for me part-time. And so part of her Creative Chick Co job training is she's taking the class with us today. So she's up in New Hampshire doing that. Doreen's asking, will the replay have closed captioning? Doreen, I believe that it will. And I also wonder if you go back a ways into the video, if it will catch up and have closed captioning while I'm still live. So something that you guys might not realize is, sorry, there was a bird right out my window and it distracted me. But something you guys might not realize is one benefit to being live on YouTube is you guys can back up the video to maybe re-see something that I shared, and then you can bounce right back to live. So if you bounce back to on the video, Doreen, YouTube might be catching up with the closed captionings on that. Again, I am still learning a lot about YouTube, so bear with me on that. And if you go back in the video, just remember your comments might be a bit off. So just be very descriptive in your questions. And anytime you want to come back to the live, if you hover over the video, you can just click that word live and that will bounce you back to wherever I am live. So, oh, thank you guys. I see some happy early birthday wishes. That's so sweet of you guys to even remember. I appreciate that. Oh, Shari said that. Thank you, Shari. I know, getting into those almost mid-40s. Shari's not far behind me. She and I are both May birthdays. We think May is the best month to have birthdays. So yay. I won't be able to watch live, but wanted to say hi. Dad and I are out and about in our 1915 Model T Roadster. I love that, Kimberly. That's so cool. And yes, please remember, if you can't watch the whole video live, you can always come back. You can watch the video multiple times. We do have a lot of chatting in the beginning, and we will be doing a lot of demoing. But remember, this class is more about learning and learning the techniques. We're not making a finished product. And that's why I really, really wanted to do this workbook style project. So I've talked about this a lot, but I just want to mention it in case you missed it. But I used to manage a paper crafting store here on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, where I live. And I have been coloring with Copics for almost 20 years now. And I pretty much started coloring with Copics and jumped right into teaching Copic classes at the store. And because Copics were fairly new in the paper crafting industry, we did something at the store where, everybody would get 36 markers in the class. They would get a workbook. I actually was showing Josie my workbook. I actually would hand stamp everybody's workbook and hand punch the covers and anyways. And so all the customers would make payments towards the class because it obviously was a pretty expensive class because they were getting 36 markers plus the class time. And I truly feel that was the best approach to teaching the class because even in all of my lawn fawn classes, whether they're online or in person, all of my card making classes, you guys are learning a lot about coloring in those classes and you're building upon your knowledge and your skill and you're practicing. But you're also focusing very hard on making sure you're coloring in the lines, making sure you're stamping straight, making sure, you're gluing things down correctly, making sure you're glittering all of the things. And because there's so much going on in a card making class, we are, not necessarily hearing all the little nuggets of information that I'm sharing about coloring. So that's why I really wanted to do this workbook. And I commissioned Angie Blom. She's a friend of mine and she's an amazing artist. And I told her kind of what images I wanted, what I kind of wanted them to look like. And she designed the images for me. I'm not going to say how long ago because it makes me sad how long it took me to get this class pulled together. But I really wanted to make sure this class was top-notch and the best that it can be. And it's a lot. It's a lot of information. I do want to just mention in your handout, hopefully you guys all found your 21-page handout. But in your handout, on page 3, where I talk about printing extra workbook pages. Those are available on the class resource page, but I also posted a link to Angie Blom's website, and she does amazing artwork, and she has a ton of digital art that you can print in color, and it's actually all 50% off this weekend. So definitely take a peek at that. Even printing some more images off, again, just to practice and to color is really, really fun. So, yay. I see Terry already asking for a Copic 2.0 and maybe some flowers. So that's a possibility, Terry. I'll be honest, I don't necessarily, I color flowers. I design cards for Pink Fresh and I, Simon Says Stamp comes out with flowers and Tim Holtz comes out with flowers. But we'll talk a little bit about my coloring style and why I stayed away from flowers a little bit in this first class in a minute. All right, it looks like a bunch of you guys have found me. I kind of wanted to make sure everybody was finding me okay. I know a class like this brings in a lot of newbie class people, and I just wanted to make sure that they are finding it okay. So somebody's asking, can you print with an inkjet and have it not smear with Copic? So I talked about this in the handout. I have had success in printing with an inkjet. It might be best to just make sure that you are just heat setting your cardstock a little bit. And you guys know I love my Ranger heat tool for things like that, so it's not going to scorch the paper. And that way it'll help dry the ink. You also can bring in your favorite cardstock to color on into a print shop like Staples or a mom and pop printer, and they can print directly onto it for you with a laser printer. And that's what this is printed on with, is a laser printer from a local print shop here on the Cape that I use. Let's see. I see people are loving my shirt. Thank you. Shirk merch should be restocked in my online shop, definitely by early June. We're waiting for that big pre-order to come in. That'll be coming hopefully mid-May. Let's see. I saw another question. Angie Blom's digital designs are 50% off on their website this whole weekend. And her website is linked on page 3 of the handout. Somebody mentioned I need to get a printer that I can print on 80-pound cardstock with. Yeah, that's kind of, it's not tricky, but if you can afford just a simple black and white laser printer, that I think would be a really good investment because most of them can handle cardstock well. And you can then, you're printing with toner, so you can do some toner foiling with it as well. All right. Oh, thank you guys. You're so sweet. Full of so many compliments. I appreciate it. Lindsay says she has 3 printers in the house and none of them can handle cardstock. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. All right. Okay. So I wanted to talk about a few things. And again, the beginning of the class might seem a little chatty, but it's a lot of good information that we need to go over, right? This is why we're all here. We got lots to learn. Keep in mind, there's all different levels of alcohol-based marker colorers here with us today. Maybe you guys can actually just let me know in the chat how long you've been coloring with your alcohol-based markers. Again, I've been coloring with mine for 20 years and I still learn things every day. And I have to say, definitely through the pandemic where I wasn't traveling and teaching more, or teaching, I was still teaching a lot, but not traveling and teaching, I really branched out in what colors I like to use because I wasn't providing markers in a class. And I just have been coloring so much more over the past couple years, and I've learned so much more. And I've even seen some improvement in my coloring. And that's something that I have said over and over again in my communications with you guys for this class is please remember that even the images that we're going to be coloring today, I have colored many, many times already. So don't get discouraged. Don't compare to others. But you need to put the time in. You need to practice. You need to try coloring over and over again to build your skill, right? I'm here to help you. I'm here to answer questions as best as I can. I'm here to give you some suggestions. But if you don't keep practicing, those skills aren't going to just appear, right? So I'm reading how long everybody's been coloring. I'm seeing 2 years, 15 years. The first crop and create, Robin was enabled. So that's only been a couple years, about a year. So we've got lots and lots and lots of changes. Lori says since crop on the Cape. So Lori, I wonder if that's since March. Do you mean this past crop on the Cape? Or do you mean like the first crop on the Cape 25 years ago? Awesome. So just keep that in mind. Some of this information might be information that you already know. Some of it might be a refresher. Maybe some of you have been coloring for a really long time, but never knew this. And as I stressed, I do think that this class is going to be good for any alcohol-based markers, but there is going to be a lot of information specific to Copic markers because that's what I color with, okay? However, this isn't like a bash all the other alcohol-based marker brands out there. That's not what it is at all. I can just give you my thoughts on why I like Copic markers, and then you guys can kind of go with it however you would like. Now, oh yes, Judy just said, is it okay to mention the printer I just bought for cardstock? Please do, Judy, please do. And that's a good thing. You guys can chit chat with each other in the chat today. If you are on Facebook, you can join my Creative Chick Studio Share Facebook group, and you guys can chit chat in there as well. And I love when you guys post about my classes. I love when you guys share what you created in my classes. I just ask, because this class is kind of unique to having a workbook, and obviously the handout is full of a lot of information that I worked really hard on, that you just don't post full multiple pages of the handout in the workbooks, that you kind of just show little snippets of things. That's just my only ask. So that other people will want to sign up and take this class with me as well, which again, the class will be available. I know I've been getting a lot of questions. So if you have a friend that you share your coloring with after this weekend, they can still sign up and I will still send them a workbook as well. So back on the fact of this, being about alcohol-based markers and about Copics, I also just wanted to mention that, again, I have been coloring with Copics for many, many years now, and there are things that I've learned, and then there are things that are just my opinion, right? I think a lot of you guys that have followed me, you know that I'm happy to share my opinion on products, on what I think works best. However, those are just my opinion, and that doesn't mean that that's the be all end all. You can most certainly have a different opinion, or maybe you're like, well, no, that's not how I do it. I do it this way. That is totally okay as well. So just keep that in mind. I can only share with you guys what I have found that works best for me. And you guys, especially if you're a beginner, I think it's great to kind of follow those tips, because then you don't need to do a lot of guesswork and trial and error on your own. But if you have been coloring for a year, 3 years, 15 years, and you do it the total opposite way and it works for you, that's totally okay as well. All right. So on my table right now, a lot of you guys have seen my Copic 101 blog post. My Copic 101 blog post, I believe, I should have double checked, but it was posted in either 2017 or 2018. It was like right around there. And I shared my top 51 markers that I think are great to start with. And the way that I came up with this list is the markers that I used time and time again when I am teaching classes. And as a result of that, looking at this list of markers, and it's just the ones with the hearts. Don't mind my little notes on the side. We'll talk about those in a minute. But all the ones with the hearts, I personally own multiples of these markers, because when I used to travel and teach, I used to provide markers for everybody to use. Okay. So, but like I mentioned, this was again, 2017, 2018. I also shared my favorite 2-color blends, and we'll talk about blending markers in a while. But I tend to almost always just use 2-color blends. So let's talk about 20 years ago. All right. So I am turning 43 or 44. I think I'm turning 44 on May 9th. That sounds right. Shari will let me know how old she's turning. But so let's talk 20 years ago. I was 24. And like I mentioned, I was working at a local paper crafting store, and I didn't have a whole lot of money. I was a single 20-something-year-old girl who put herself through college, was still paying off all my college loans, and I was doing what I loved, but not making $1 million working at a paper crafting store. And so when products came out, I was having to buy them. Granted, I had a really nice discount at Colorful Creations, the store I managed. But again, Copic markers for me were really expensive back then. And, so I got immediately overwhelmed when I knew that there were hundreds of them. And so I just kind of morphed my coloring into what I could afford, right? So I just do to color blending because that way I didn't need to own a million markers. And I really liked the results. I liked how it came out. I liked the way it looked. It was kind of a simpler way of coloring. To me, it wasn't overwhelming. And now, mind you, if you own every single Copic and you own 2 other brands of alcohol-based markers, that is totally okay. Again, I'm just kind of giving you some reference. So this Copic 101 blog post, again, I posted many, many years ago, and many of you have found it helpful over the years. But I know a lot of you have been taking many of my online classes, especially over the past couple years, and you've been building up your collection of markers, right? So if I'm teaching an online class, you do not need to have all the specific colors that I'm using. However, some people have used that as a way to build their collection. Once you have this top 50, as you start to take classes with me, you're only going to need to buy a couple here, a couple there. So that's why I shared this list. I did not want to share this list to overwhelm any of you that are brand new to collecting any of your Copic markers. However, I knew many of you have been asking me for a 2.0 list of my favorite colors. So I went through and I basically picked out the colors that I know I use the most. Now, I have around 170 Copics, and I have a friend of mine. She used to take all of my classes. She lives here in Massachusetts, and she kind of had gone through some health stuff, and she wanted to spend more time with her grandkids, and she wasn't using her Copics as much, so I purchased them from her. I gave Chris's daughter like a really good set. She's so artistic. So she got a ton of markers, and then I kind of filled in some holes with some colors of mine. So I have 170, but this is really what I use, right? And it's definitely not 170. And a lot of the times you guys are asking me, well, how do you know what color combos to choose? And we'll go over that. But once you start to find your favorite color combos, you can, go back and use those same color combos over and over again. All right. So as I'm doing a lot of this chatting at the beginning, if I miss one of your questions, please, don't think I'm ignoring you. It's just I have some really good information I want to make sure I get out there and I don't forget. It's always good to put the word question in all caps before your question. That really helps me kind of see if you have a question versus you guys are just chit-chatting together. I see Doreen's asking, I get confused with the Copic lines, the sketch, the chow, what's the difference? I actually, Doreen, am going to go over that, and I go over that very thoroughly in your handout if you look at page 6, but we will go over that. I did see that Josie said something about us always being a certain age. I'm trying to scroll back up to see, because I was having a hard time remembering how old I am. Let's see. She said something funny. Oh, so she's 45, so she thinks I'm turning 44. Okay, that's good. She goes, but when it comes down to it, we're still going to be celebrating the big 40 for a handful more years. I think that's wise. I celebrated my 30th birthday for a long time. Actually, it's kind of a running joke. When I first met Chris, we were at a work convention, and it was kind of like I knew I must have really liked him because I was honest with how old I was. I didn't tell him I was 30 because for many years I just told everybody I was 30. Let's see. People are sharing how many markers they have. And Pamela says, I can't get the link to the iPad. So Pamela, I actually had shared, somebody emailed me about that yesterday. I'm assuming you're on another device right now watching me. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and then you go on your iPad. You need to be logged into your YouTube, your account on YouTube. you can look at your most recently liked videos. So hopefully that helps, Pamela. No worries, Doreen, no worries. There's a lot of pages. So page 6, page 21, there's a lot of pages. Deborah says 70 is the new 40. So I'm a teenager. I love that, Deborah. Thank you. Heidi's going to stay 40 for now too. All right. We'll just do like a 40 club. And let's see. Paula has full set syndrome. That's totally okay, Paula. Totally okay. All right. Shari says 40 was fun. Let's do that one again. Yeah, we got to be together for her 40th birthday. All right. So I'm seeing lots of questions on things that we are going to talk about. So again, if I'm not answering you, it's because I know we're going to talk about it. So again, this is, I think, a great list. It doesn't mean you need to collect all of these, but a lot of you like to kind of know what colors I use, and these are the colors that I use the most. So the other fun thing that I was very excited to get done in time for this class is I added a new free printable on my website. And at the bottom of page 2 on your handout, you'll see the information about the free printables. And I was trying to encourage you guys if you wanted to print these before class. So this is my Creative Chick class resource binder. This is available on my website. I'm not going to lie, I might be a little bit partial, but it really is the prettiest binder in all of the land. It's really nice and soft and bright and colorful, and I love it so, so much. This is my actual ink smushing that I used for the artwork. And when you purchase a binder from me, you get 6 of these dividers. They're a really nice heavyweight divider. They've been redesigned from the ones that originally were part. And they also extend past sheet protectors. You can also purchase the divider separately, and this is to help you organize. And so this is a printable that I came out with when I came out with my binders. And I think this is a great printable to have these on hand, printed on your favorite cardstock that you color with your alcohol-based markers. And let's say you take a class with me and we use Mermaid for You, which no shocker here, it's one of my favorite Lawn Fawn sets. And I just use a different color combo than you've ever used before, or maybe you just really love this color combo. And so what I recommend, because I know like sometimes trying to find the handout or find that color combo, you know, multiple months down the road, what you can do is just stamp one image from that stamp set where we use that color combo, write out what stamp set it's from. You might also want to write Lawn Fawn if you're not going to remember what brand. And then here you can mark out which colors you used, and then also do a practice of the blend down here. And again, these are free printables, so you can print out multiple pages of this, have them on hand, and be able to keep track of color combos for specific stamp images here. However, I realize that sometimes you might learn a color combo for, let's say, the mermaid tail, but you just want to remember it. Maybe you don't, you're not going to necessarily always use it on a mermaid or whatever. So this is this new free printable that I designed where you can keep track of the color combo. Go ahead and color in your balloon. And then down here, you'll mark which colors you use to do the blend. And this is another way of keeping track of your favorite color combos, okay? And then the other thing real quick, and you can even do this now or do it during lunch break, but I have a free printable for a dotted notebook page and a lined notebook page, and I have them in teal, but you can also choose to print them in grayscale if you want to save on your color ink. And these are just, again, always going to be on my website, available to anybody. They're just meant to be great resources for you guys to be able to keep track of your coloring and hopefully, become a really good resource for you, okay? All right. Sandra is saying that there are a number of people on Facebook that cannot get into the class. The link is not active on the worksheet, and copy pasting the link isn't working for them. Okay, so I never put the link to class on the worksheet. So Shari or Brianne, if you guys could pop on over to the Facebook group and just let them know they need to log into their account on shirkus.com. And then the link is towards the bottom of the page of the class resource page. So they log into their account on shirkus.com, and then they click my classes and events, and then they will be able to do that. So it looks like maybe the link is not clickable. So hold on one second, you guys. I'm going to go to my website and just check my website really quick to make sure things are okay. So just hold on one second. Chat amongst yourselves for just a second. I was doing a lot of things all at once very quickly. So sometimes there are little bumps in the road. So just give me 1 minute. And I'm not seeing any of your comments right now because I'm actively on my website, just making sure things are working. I see what people are saying. Got it. I got it. Hold on 1 second. For some reason, they are not clickable. So let me just fix this. If you guys, if anybody is over in my Facebook group, can just let people know that I am fixing it right now. I'm updating my website, so they might want to do a refresh, or even better, log out and log back in. And it is clickable links now. All right. Thank you, guys. Sorry about that. I did not know that it wasn't clickable. I apologize. Guys, some of you were just smarty pants and figured out how to do it. I apologize. I did not know that it wasn't clickable. So my apologies. So hopefully we will get some people over here from my Facebook group. I'm sure they're all in a panic, and I hate making people feel like that. Oh gosh, yeah, I'm seeing all the comments. All right, so I'm gonna let Brianne and Shari kind of help out in my Facebook group for that, if they don't mind. And I am gonna keep chatting because I feel like we've really just been chatting about it's all important, right? But not like make or break stuff. So people can, thank you so much, Shari. I appreciate it. I saw so many people here. I just assumed that everybody else was going to watch the replay. So I did not even think that people were having a hard time finding it. So I feel so bad. I know that's not the way we want to start our adventure in coloring. All right, so these printables are available, okay? And maybe if we start to see the numbers go up, I will just remind people that they will be able to rewatch the first, however many minutes I've been live so far. 30 minutes. I don't really think they've missed a ton. We haven't even started coloring yet. So, all right. No, the links should be all clickable. I wasn't trying to keep them private. I mean, you should never share the links because they are unlisted unlisted links, but yeah, my website usually automatically makes them clickable, and I must have just done something where it didn't. So apologies about that. All right. So free printables, definitely utilize these, you guys. I think they'd be really fun to share if you get a sheet colored and share them on social media, because I just think they're a great resource for people. And then I also wanted to share with you my thoughts on the workbook. I didn't want my workbook to be this big, bulky thing that I had to mail, because I know that there are quite a few of you that live outside of the US that take my classes, and I didn't want it to be too expensive for you guys to be able to get it. And I saw Simple Stories had this cute little album, and it was the perfect color teal, so I just fell in love with it. I think having these Velcro pockets is a great way to store your Copic workbook right in your resource binder. So you'll have it nice and easy access. These pockets are the same pockets that I personally use to put my magnetic boards in. And this is how I store my standalone dies, all in binders. I have videos of that shared on my Facebook page. But these are nice and sturdy. And again, in here, we can have our Copic workbook. And I'll talk about setting up the workbook real briefly, because obviously I did not put everybody's workbooks together for them. My friend Julie was awesome, and she got the international orders shipped while I was on vacation. And then Josie came down during her spring break and helped me ship all the US orders, which was so, so awesome. All right. Yay. Yeah, Heidi says, I love that you kept the workbook small so it's easy to stick in my tool bag to take with me as well. Yes, exactly. Awesome, awesome. And just so you know, again, this is a Simple Stories album. It's still available. So you actually can purchase refill pages for it. If you want to put more pages, it can hold a lot more in here. So keep that in mind. So my thought process was, you guys got 2 stickers in your kit. You got these 2 stickers here. So my thought process was, this one is going to go on the cover of your album. I'm personally going to hold my album like this, so that's why I positioned it that way. All right. And then this sticker is just a little thank you for signing up for class. I designed it and I just thought it was so cute. And all of these vinyl stickers will work like on your, your cups or your Yetis or whatever it is that you have. And what's nice about it is they are waterproof, and like down the road, if you decide you want to take it off, you can, and it doesn't leave a sticky residue. So you can add them to your computer. I've actually put some on my bumper of my car. So this is just a fun do with what you will sticker. I do have more of these in my online shop for sale. So if you need multiples to put everywhere, I got you. You can do that. So then when you open up your workbook, there were just 2 intro pages. I just put them in front to back so that you have that information there at your leisure, helping you find things very quickly. In it, I remind you how to get to the class resources. I know sometimes, especially if you're not taking classes with me all the time, you might not remember how to do that. So that information will be right there. I have a link to my Janabler alert page. That's where I put all my affiliate links for shoppable places that I love to shop. But I also put my short links for Blick Arts. That's where I tend to get a lot of my Copic supplies because I use the Copic Originals, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But they also have a really decent price. And then I also put the link to Simon Says Stamp. They do good sales on Copics periodically, and I always try to share that when they do. And then I also just put a link to my shop because I've been adding some of my most favorite supplies. Obviously, like the binder is there, and we'll talk about a few other things that I have in my online shop that are there as well. All right, and then on the back of this handout, again, I'm just reminding you that this is all about practicing. There's my email address, so you can always contact me if you have questions. If you are posting anything from the class, you can use this hashtag #CreativeChickClasses. And then I'm just reminding you, please don't share full pages of the handout. Little sneaks are preferred, just so that we're not giving away my class content for free. The link to my Facebook group is here if you want to join and, jump in and share what you're coloring or maybe your crafty setup for class. I also have a link to my tutorial page, my email newsletter. If you're not already subscribed to that, make sure you subscribe. Even though you got an email from me for class, I can't legally sign you up for my general email newsletter. So make sure you sign up for that. And then a link to all of my other classes. All right. If you are missing anything in your package, just send an email and I will be happy to, send you what's missing. Again, Josie and I hustled and packed up those orders so quickly because it was such a weird time for my vacation and when I had to get these in the mail for you guys to get them in time for class. So errors can happen and I'm happy to rectify that for you. All right, and then I just made this list right here. I just redid it smaller, so I would always have it in my little book. And then we start to dive into our workbook pages, which we'll start to kind of work with as we go. So you guys can put your workbook pages in whatever order you guys would like. But again, I just wanted to kind of explain the setup of the workbook. All right. Awesome. All right. Now, I have a feeling that a bunch of you will want to know how to change your tips and refill your markers. And I wanted to go over that before we actually get started to coloring, because some of you might have been waiting to do that and you want to do that before we start coloring. Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, and again, I printed out the handout so that I can keep referring to the page numbers on the handout for you. So we are going to talk about refilling and the tip changing, but I first want to talk about the differences in Copic markers. And this information is on page 6 of your handout. There are 4 kinds of Copic markers. One kind is the wide marker. It's approximately 3/4 of an inch wide. They actually don't even come in colors anymore. They come empty that you can refill them or add color to them, any color that you want. I do not own any of those. I don't see you guys needing any of those. But I just wanted to at least let you guys know that that is the case, and not pretend that, that they don't exist. I didn't want to talk about that. The other style of Copic markers is the chow, okay? And this is the circular barrel. So it just has a circled cap, so it doesn't have the color name or color number on the cap, but it does have it on the barrel for you. And it comes with a broad tip and a brush tip. Now, we need to remember, you guys, that these markers have been, like I said, they kind of came into the paper crafting world around 20 years ago. However, they've been around since the 1980s, and they are heavily used by artists and architectures and comic book designers and all of these different art skills, okay? So when we look at this as a paper crafter, some of us are like, well, why is there a broad tip? That's silly. We're never going to use that. But you need to remember there's a lot of other people that are using these markers, not just paper crafters, not just card makers. Okay. And so the chow is a really affordable way to get started in having some Copics. They cost, at the time of this class, they cost $3.90 a marker at Blick Art. And so that's a really affordable way to start collecting Copics. And you can still refill these. It does have the smallest barrel, meaning not as much ink is in here. That's why they're able to sell it at a cheaper price. So you might need to refill your chows before a friend that buys sketch or a friend that buys originals. But it's a great way to get started. And I will also encourage you that it's not the end of the world to own all three styles, right? Maybe you start with the chows because that's what you can afford, and then you get some colors of the sketch, and maybe you get some colors of the originals. It's okay to have all three kinds. They all work the same. And this is E33, for example. E33 is the same color in a chow, in a sketch, and in an original. Okay, and it's the same refill bottle that you use. So I'm not saying that you're going to buy a E33 chow and then 2 months down the road you're going to buy a E33 sketch. No. What I mean is you get a few chows and a few colors, and then maybe you get a few sketch or a few originals. Okay. Let's see. Judy says, I didn't get the pages in my flip book. Can I find them somewhere on the site in the smaller size? So Judy, I'm not sure if do you mean the actual workbook pages? Like you didn't get a clear bag with these workbook pages in your package from me? If that's the case, there is a downloadable printable for you to be able to print these pages. You just want to make sure you're printing them on alcohol-based marker-friendly cardstock. Paula says, Jen, can you share your swatch for Copics that fit in the book? It is a great idea. Do you mean you want a picture of it, Paula, that you can print out yourself and add to your own book? Again, I'm not quite sure a couple of those questions, so just give me more information. So Judy, if you did not get these inserts, send me an email and I will mail them to you. But right now on the resource page, if you have the ability to print at home on Copic friendly cardstock, the pages are on the resource page that you can print them yourself. However, I'm not expecting you to have to do that, so just send me an email to creative-chick@shirkus.com and I will send you this out right away. It'll go out Monday morning. Okay. Yes, Donna says, I have a mixture of the barrels. I wasn't too particular with the barrels. I needed certain colors, and she just grabbed whatever they had. Perfect. No problem. All right. Yeah, I can take a picture of the smaller page of my favorite colors, and I'll upload that to the class resource page. I'll get that done by Monday. All right. All right. All right. Okay. So that's the chow, okay? Then we have the sketch, and for whatever reason, the sketch is by far the most popular in the paper crafting world, and it has a broad tip, just like the chow, and it also has a super brush tip, just like the chow. So these are the same tips, and again, for whatever reason, the sketch became kind of the most popular in the paper crafting world. I always kind of march to the beat of my own drum, and we'll talk about why I like the Copic originals. But these are nice. I'll talk a bit more why I'm not prone to use the sketch as much. But again, The caps are oval. They have the color number and the name on them. So that does make it a little bit easier if you're prone to be wanting to know what color you're grabbing. I think that some people have made little circle stickers for their chows to be able to label at least the numbers. And so the chows come in 156 colors. The sketch come in 358. The sketch comes in the most colors available. Okay. So I already talked about inkjet printers. A lot of inkjet printers will be Copic friendly if you just kind of heat set after you print. I would recommend using like a Ranger heat tool so you don't scorch your cardstock. And I also talk about that in the handout when I talk about printing your extra workbook pages. All right, so then we have the Copic Originals, which are the square-barreled markers. These come in 214 colors. It comes with that, oops, let me find one that I haven't changed yet. So it comes with the broad tip. All right. And then it comes with a little bullet tip. And this is what I fell in love with back in the day. I used to teach for a stamp company that also had small images. And so having that little bullet tip was just so much easier for me. It doesn't let out a lot of ink. I find, and this is a personal thing, but I find with the sketch or the super brush that the sketch and the chow have, that super brush just sometimes lets out a whole lot of ink, and it makes it hard for me to be able to print it out. I'm sorry, I'm reading a question. It makes it hard for me to color with them, okay? So I just was always more, appealing to me was having that little bullet tip. Now, I talked about in my handout, over time, I did find a use to having a brush tip. And we'll talk about using your brush tip and different ways of coloring as we go on today. But what's nice with the Copic Originals is I was able to change my broad tip to a brush tip. And the brush tip is a whole lot shorter than a super brush tip that's on the sketch and on the chow. And so it lets out a lot less ink, which I find is more manageable. Now, I've already seen it in the comments today, and I get this comment a lot, that people, after they've either colored with my markers in a class or after they've taken a class with me, they wish they knew because they would have purchased the originals first. But I will let you know, that doesn't mean you need to hate on your sketches. You can change your broad tip of your sketch to a finer point. Now, I know that you still have that super brush tip, but I do think with practice, you can make that super brush tip work better for you and work a little bit easier, okay? And we're going to talk about changing the tips in just a minute. So the classic square Copics come in 214 colors. So I do own some sketch. Some of them, again, I got secondhand from a friend of mine. Some of them are colors that I love, but they don't come in the Copic Originals. So this is a pink combo that I love. It's the R85, R83, R81. I actually learned this from Lawn Fawn many, many years ago. So I own the sketch in these, and that's okay. It's okay to have different ones, in your collection. What scale percentage did you use to make the workbook pages? You should just be able to print them at 100%, Cheryl. They're already sized to be the 4x6 pages. If you're not sure, then you can print on copy paper first and make sure it's printing correctly on your printer. All right. And Lindsay says she loves the bullet tip. She still uses a lot of the Spectrum tri-blends with tips. Copics were always harder because of the brush. I just recently learned I can change nibs. Game changer. Can't wait to try. That's great. So LB says that she had a hard time getting in and now she canceled her subscription. So LB, I'm not quite sure what you mean by canceled your subscription. If you mean on YouTube, I'm not quite sure what that means, but if you send me an email, I will email you back during break. So send me an email to creative-chick@shirkus.com. Let me know, and I can try to help you before session 2 starts later today. Let's see. Aunt Crazy says, I printed them out and they came out full page size. So you might want to check your printer sizes, guys. If your printer, you're having it fit the page, it's going to print out full page. But the pages are formatted to be 4x6. All right. All right. Let's see. I feel like, yeah, so Shari, if you're helping Judy, the workbook pages are downloadable on the resource page. Okay. All right. So again, at the beginning of this class, you guys, because I'm sharing so much information with you, I might be missing some questions. So don't get discouraged. Putting the word question all in caps before it really helps me see it. If I see a question come up that I know I'm going to be answering today, later, when it kind of pertains to the class, I also might just kind of not answer it now because I kind of have an order of the way I want to be explaining it. Okay. All right. I got a bunch of people that are saying that they love their sketches so much more now that they have done a different nib. So let's talk about, and then the other quick thing I just wanted to mention about the 3 different styles, which I kind of mentioned when I was talking about the Chow, but the Chow has the smallest barrel, meaning it holds the least amount of ink. Sketch kind of has a medium, barrel, and the Originals is the largest. So the Original holds the most ink, and the Sketch and the Originals tend to be the same price. So that's something to think of as well. And something that I talked about in the beginning of the handout on page 4 are Copics worth the price, and what about other alcohol-based markers? So like I've mentioned, Copics are an artist grade marker that people have been using for fine art, graphic design, illustration since 1987. So they've been around a long, long time. They're a transparent alcohol-based marker, which allows them to blend on paper. And they won't pill the cardstock like a water-based marker. So like a Tombow brush marker is a water-based marker. And if you try to blend them on cardstock, your cardstock is going to pill. And the nibs in these Copics are handmade nibs. So they're very, very high quality, which is why you want to be very gentle when you're coloring and be gentle when we're taking them out and refilling and changing our nibs. And Copics have never retired their colors, and, their colors are pretty consistent over the years. Again, an E33 that I purchased, like this E33 marker specifically, is literally probably 18 years old, and it's the same color as this Chow that I just bought a couple weeks ago, so I'd have the example in class today. It's the same shade, the refill's the same, and so that consistency is very, very nice, okay? And the other thing I just want to mention, because there are a lot of other brands of alcohol-based markers out there, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with any of the other brands. I would just tell you to, if you're new to purchasing alcohol-based markers, for the most part, you can mix and match alcohol-based markers. So somebody earlier mentioned, they have Spectrum tri-blends. Those should blend with Copics if you wanted them to, because they're all alcohol-based. But something to keep in mind as you're purchasing, maybe in the beginning, is, the brand. Is it a brand name Is it a brand name you trust? Is it a brand name you've heard of for a while? The price, definitely keep in mind on the price. If something is fairly inexpensive, sometimes that doesn't make it better, right? It might make it more affordable for us for now, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to last. Color variety. Are there a lot of color options? Again, I don't want to have 358 Copics, but I am still happy with the wide variety of colors available. Accessibility. Are they easy to find? Are there places for you to buy them from consistently? And are they easy to find? Think of the lifespan. Again, I can't attest for other markers because I haven't owned other markers for 20 years, but a lot of my Copics are 20 years old and they're still working really, really well with some little bit of maintenance. My class Copics, they got a lot of love, you guys. People are pretty hard on class supplies, and even those markers are going strong. Josie actually took a set home to be able to do this class with me this weekend, so she's going to be using some markers that I've had for 16 years and have been used by thousands and thousands of people. And then the other thing to keep in mind is when you're choosing what brand to purchase, is there a lot of information out there? Is there a lot of instruction out there? Is there a lot of knowledge out there to help you and answer questions and be able to troubleshoot and things like that? So when I tell people about Copic markers, again, I don't think you need a whole lot to start with. I think that list of 50, if you had those 50 markers for a very long time, you'd still be able to color really cute things. For the longest time, I only had 70 Copics, and I was happy with that. And so I can tell you when you do purchase Copics, they are truly a lifetime marker. I kind of joke with you guys that you should add them into your will, because after you're gone, the Copics will probably still be going strong and you can pass them down to somebody maybe in your family that is artistic and would enjoy them. So just keep that in mind. Isabella's mentioning, she thinks the tri-blends are nice, but you will always run out of the lightest color first, and then you can't refill it. So that's something to keep in mind. So awesome. If you're just getting on, I'm so sorry, you guys, for that confusion of the links not being clickable. I apologize about that. Please know you'll be able to go back and watch the replay. You haven't missed a ton. We haven't even started coloring yet, and I apologize. I don't like you guys to have to start a class with me frustrated, so I'm so sorry. Keeping in mind if they're refillable, and that's kind of what I meant by the lifespan. Are they going to last you a long time? And because Copics are refillable and you can change the nibs, they are literally going to last you forever. All right. So now that we went over that, what I wanted to go over is the fact of how to refill them and how to change the tips. Because again, I think some of you might be waiting to do that for class, and especially before we get into coloring, I wanted to go over that. Now, when you are purchasing nibs for your markers, you really want to make sure that you're purchasing the right ones for the right markers. So I go over changing tips and refilling. I know it was towards the end of my handout, I feel like. So many pages of information, you guys. All right. So page 14 is where I talk about changing your tips, okay? And I do link to all the different tips and all of that. So when I'm changing tips on my Copic Originals, all right, they also call them the classics. So I want to make sure when I'm purchasing nibs that the packaging says that. And so these are the brush tips that I change my broad tips for. And then these standard fines are the little bullet nibs. So over time, if I've worn down the bullet nib from coloring a lot or pressing too hard, I can change those so they're nice new nibs. All right. And then we've got the sketch. And so for sketch, you can definitely change your super brush nib if that one wears out over time. But as far as changing your broad tip to be a fine tip, you have the option of a sketch fine or a medium round. And I highly recommend that you purchase a package of each and you try each of them. I think that this is a personal preference, okay? So, I don't want to ever tell anybody like, oh, you should definitely get the medium round or you should definitely get the sketch fine, because I think this is a personal preference. And so I think you should try them both. Now, when you get to wanting to change your tips, I don't recommend buying tips for all of your markers and changing all of your markers, okay? Because I still have some of my originals that I haven't changed my broad tip to be a brush because I just haven't felt the need. And the tips are not, they're not super expensive, but they're a little pricey. And so I don't want you to waste your time or money changing. So I just keep tips on hand. I actually open the packages and I keep them in a little Ziploc bag, and I keep this tucked right with my markers. And as I feel the need to change a tip, I change a tip. Okay. Aunt Crazy is asking me about storing my markers vertically. I did talk about this in the handout. Again, you guys, I know you guys just got the handout, but there's so much good information in the handout. And Copic does recommend storing your markers horizontally so that the ink does not pool to one side. And when I say pool to one side, I don't mean like your marker is going to leak, but it just pools. However, I have been storing my markers vertically since we've lived here on Cape Cod. So it's been 6 years, well, since we moved back from Rhode Island. I've lived on the Cape for 20 years now. But so I have not had a problem storing mine vertically, but I do just want to put the disclaimer that Copic does recommend storing them horizontally. And I also link to the storage unit I use in my Raskog cart. Let's see. Jennifer says her girls argued over who should get the Copics in her will. I love it. Lindsay says, I wish I had taken this class before I changed all my tips. Yeah, so Mary says that she changed her nibs as she needs for colors used in my classes. And Jennifer said, is there a time when you use the broad tip? So this is also a personal thing, but I, in the olden days, would use my broad tip to swatch out like my swatch list of the colors I owned, just as a quick swipe of color because it was nice and broad. But I can tell you, like, in probably 12 years, I have not used a broad tip on a marker. Now, there are some people who teach Copic classes out there that use the broad tip to do backgrounds and different things, but it's just not I do not use the broad tip, no. So if you're new to coloring, again, don't feel you need to change all your tips. Change ones as you feel the need, okay? Andrea says, sometimes my markers get leaky, like too much ink starts coming out. Is that a tip issue? It happens suddenly. So I'm guessing Andrea has the sketch markers. The sketch markers do tend to burp a bit more. My originals never burp. And so what I recommend when you're coloring is to open both caps so that it can breathe, and always just keep an eye on your tip. You're going to be able to tell if it's juicy. And if it's not juicy, you'll be able to tell. So, but yes. And so that's my tip for that. If you hear any yowling in the background, that is one of my kitties, Mr. Harley. He likes to hunt his toy and there's no stopping him. So I apologize. Let's see. Can you get the smaller brush tip for the sketch? No, you cannot. Definitely cannot get the smaller brush tip for the sketch. And Dottie says, how do you store the nibs you remove? I throw them away, Dottie. I know some people try to keep them in Ziploc bags, but once a tip and a nib dries out, it's really not good for that. So it's not going to work well again. So once I pull out a broad tip to change to a brush tip, I throw the broad tip away. And if I'm changing, like let's say my bullet tip has worn down, I'm putting a new bullet tip in, I just throw the old one away. I love my holder for my markers. Let's see if I can get it to kind of show up on screen here. Yeah, it's sitting right next to me right here. It's in my Raskog cart. And what I love about it is I can wheel it away and wheel it close to me, and it doesn't take up any space on my studio table. I love that because I never have enough space on my studio table. All right. Let's see. Yay, Megan has the same storage holder and she loves it too. Great, great, great. And this is an Etsy shop, Our Gray Barn, and I linked that in your handout as well. That is not an affiliate link or anything. I just love their products, so I like to share them out. Okay. So let's go ahead and change some tips. So again, I discovered that my Copic original here, that my YG99 Marine Green still has a broad tip. I don't need it to be a brush tip, but I'm going to go ahead and change it. I do highly recommend getting these little Copic tweezers. They're very inexpensive. I link to them on my handout. It's just these little teeth. Let me bring it back. These little teeth so that it gently will grab your nib. And especially if we're refilling, we don't want to damage our nib, right? If I'm pulling a nib out to just throw it away, it's not as big of a deal. But I go ahead and I just pull the cap off and I use the tweezers and pull the nib out. Now, then what I'll do is grab one of my brush tips. And with my hands now, I'm just going to gently place this in. Now, the brush tips for the originals have these metal prongs on the side. You kind of need to like find the right way to put them in and give it a gentle squeeze. And then it has these teeth on the side and I just gently push that in, but I'm not even really touching the brush tip. Then I'm going to hold my marker or put it in my holder upside down. And what's going to happen is the ink is going to fill in the tip of the marker. And I'm just waiting to see so I can show you guys that part. There is a picture of this on page 15. It sometimes takes a minute. And yeah. So yes, so I have the holder that they have ones for the originals, you guys, and they're circular holes. And so my sketch fit in here, they just move around. So if they don't have the originals on their site, just send them a message. I'm sure they can make you one. See how my tip is filling with ink, you guys? It's kind of fun to watch it. So I have the circular one that fits the originals, and then my sketch fit in there. They just kind of rock around a little bit, but it doesn't bother me. And now my tip is all filled. All right. Let me grab just a piece of Nina cardstock, and then we're good to go. So that is changing a tip. So I'm going to change one of my sketch tips to be a sketch fine tip. Why not? So I'll grab one of these sketch fine tips. And I don't really use this color much. So let me find, I'll do E23 because I use this color a lot. So I'm going to take out the broad tip with my tweezers, my Copic choppers, and then I'm going to just gently put in the sketch fine tip. And I'm going to actually use these tweezers again to give it a little push. And so now I've changed that one. And again, I'm going to hold it upside down and the ink will go there in just a minute. I'm going to set it over here upside down so I can show you guys something else while we're waiting. Okay. Yes, so these tweezers are Copic tweezers and they're not that expensive. And again, I just like that they have the little teeth and they're gentle with the nibs. So highly, highly recommend them. Okay. Yeah. Isn't it so cool, Doreen? Organize More also has marker holders, and they love that Deneen loves that they sit on her desk and she loves the look of them. I have the Organize More marker holders on my bookcase that's right here in front of me. And those are all my class Copics. So yes, I like those as well. Does it matter the orientation of the tip when you put it in the marker? Yes. Looking at the tip, you can kind of tell this right side is the tip you're going to want to color with. This is the side you're inserting. So that's a good question. And same thing with these guys. The right side is the tip you're going to color with, and this is the side you're inserting. Okay. Does everyone know that Copic has an app to record all your markers? You can have it on your phone when you shop. Thank you, Robin. That's very helpful. If you're trying to collect markers, there is a Copic app for you to keep track of the ones that you own. Let's see. All right. So that is changing tips. Okay, now, again, I'm going to throw these broad tips away. I'm just going to toss them in here for now. Now let's talk about refilling our markers. Okay. So refilling, I feel like makes you guys more nervous than it really needs to. So hopefully this will kind of take away a little bit of the scariness. So back in the day, they had these refill bottles, and they called them Various Ink. And it was this type of refill bottle. And this is pretty much what I have for almost all of my refills. I actually have a few refills that I don't have this bottle, and I'm actually going to put a shout out and ask people if they might have those colors in this bottle, because the way I store these is these fit really nicely into ink pad storage, and they're on my wall, and I just like having the rainbow of colors. But what they recently did in the past couple years is they've changed their refill bottle to be these circular refill bottles. And the reason why they did this was mainly to make refilling less chance of mess, because they have this long nozzle now that's easier to insert into your marker and press the ink in versus this here. They used to sell something called a booster that you'd have to insert into your marker and then drip from here the ink in. I've been refilling my markers for so long that I have no problem refilling my markers with this tip on the left, but this tip on the right is definitely more user friendly, okay? Josie's saying flashback to in-person retreats when her job was switched to Copic filler at some point in the event. Yeah, it got a little crazy at my events because my Copic markers, I didn't have time before a big event to go and check all my class markers to see if they needed to be refilled. So we were all running around the room refilling markers constantly. Even my friend 27, he was there one day and he was running around filling markers. But anyways, now everybody brings their own coloring device, and you know, if they're not refilled, it's not my problem. Robin says, I do now have 3 BG11 markers. Why do you have so many, Robin? I mean, that's a good color to have many of, but Doreen says, I have the Copic swatch and it allows you to color 3 shades of a color. I'm not quite sure what that means. Paula says, you always give us so much information in all your technique classes. I hope you consider doing a distress crayon class at some point. You guys are so cute with all your suggestions of other classes while I'm teaching this class. Yes, so teacher 4416 says, I have a local place in Pennsylvania that may have the old one she did last year. I won't be there until July, but I can check if you still haven't found what you're looking for. Ooh, thank you. If you could send me a quick email, that will kick my butt to make a list of the ones that I need old bottles for. And I don't even care if they're empty. I just want the old bottles. And there are some stores that will refill your markers for you. So Papercraft Clubhouse is my local store, although she is 2 hours away in Connecticut. She does refilling for Copics. I don't know if Scrappy Chic does refilling. I know they sell Copics. But yeah, so keep that in mind. If you guys have a local store, they might do that. Robin says she has 3 of the same marker because her button got unpressed in the app. All right. So somebody's asking if you can change the tips in the chow. So there are no tips that I could find that specifically say they're for the chows, although I have heard of people changing their super brush tip with a sketch super brush tip. But I have not done that, nor do I have a recommendation for that. But maybe somebody in the comments can leave some information. Okay. So refilling your Copics. If your Copics start to become scratchy, see how my tip here, let's see if we can get this up on, see how it looks kind of, this is a W2 marker, but see how it's getting white? Let me find, let me put it against this. Maybe now you'll be able to see. See how it's getting white kind of at the base? It's kind of hard to see on camera, but I can see it. It's getting a bit white and spotty at the base. If you are taking longer to blend, again, if your marker is squeaking or scratching, what you're going to end up doing is pressing harder, thinking that's going to fix things, and that's going to ruin your tip, okay? And we don't want to ruin our tips, right? I was trying to find a marker. I know actually quite a few of mine need to be refilled, but of course at this point in time, I'm not able to find one. I was looking at the, okay, this one. Everybody listen. Look, hear that? And see, it's so dry, okay? So you want to make sure you're refilling. Now, as a new owner of markers, don't go buy a refill for every marker that you buy. Just buy them as you need them, because it all depends on what you're coloring, how often you're coloring. And honestly, if you're a hobby crafter, you might not need to refill your markers for years, okay? And most likely it's going to be your light colors first that you're going to have to refill. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But save your money. Don't go buy all the refills. Unless you're finding this amazing deal, I just do not recommend that. Okay. So I love that Shari is sharing links to our Gray Barn, which is my organizer for my markers. And now she's finding things from them that she needs. Yeah, they have a solid top for the Raskog cart. And then because Shari flipped her top so she could put her die cut machine on it. So yeah, look at that. Genabled, and you didn't even mean to be genabled, Shari. Okay, so I mentioned that I like to use a jewelry scale when I am refilling my markers, okay? And the jewelry scale, I linked it in your handout, but the jewelry scale is not a perfect science. Is everybody listening? It is not a perfect science. It is just helpful to use to get a sense of how much ink to put in, but it's not a perfect science, okay? So when I'm refilling, I tend to go on the low end of the number that I shared, not the high end, all right? But it's a lot easier, I feel, to use the scale so that you're not blindly just dropping ink in and you're not sure how much to put in, okay? So on page 16 of the handout, I show you guys how I do my refilling, which we're going to go over in a minute. And then I also give you the grams of what a marker kind of should weigh, all right? So my Copic Original, I always take the caps off when I'm weighing it, should weigh around 18 grams. Look at this. It's at 10.7 right now. All right. So I know it needs some love. All right. I did not grab my YG17 refill and it's up on the wall. So I'm not going to refill this one right now, but that just gives you an idea of how you can know if your marker needs to be refilled. Now, I did grab my Y15 refill because I feel like my light colors always need some love. So this is at 13.2. Again, I'm weighing it with no caps on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the brush tip. I'm not going to take out the little bullet tip because this brush tip has those little metal teeth on either side that make it really easy for my tweezers to gently pull it up. So see, I'm taking this brush tip out, okay? And I'm gonna set this aside. Oh, I have stuff on Harley's seat, so let me move that because he just jumped up here. Sorry, Harley. Are we done hunting for a little bit? Okay. So now I have my Y15 refill. Now this is the old style bottle. I will show you how much easier it is with the new style bottle once in just a minute, okay? So what I do is I just gently drip some ink into where I took the nib out from. So you kind of have to line it up and be careful. I always have, you guys know, I always have my flour sackcloth in my lap. So if it accidentally drips out, I can just wipe it. But I'm going to add a few drips. Oops, see, I just dripped off the edge right here. So I'm just going to take my sackcloth and just go like that. Now, what I'm going to do is put my tip back in. And we're going to give it a little weigh. So it's up to 14.1, okay? Now, so for a Copic Original, I listed 18 grams. However, like I said, be aware. Now, because I was holding this upside down, I can tell that this tip is really juicy right now. So I'm going to let it rest a little bit before I add any more ink, okay? The other thing that I'll do sometimes when I'm even teaching a class or I don't want to take time to weigh and all the things is you can just take your refill and touch it to the tip and let it soak in a little bit of ink. And that's kind of a quick fix, you know, if you're not in the mood to get into all the things, right? Okay. All right. But I will tell you that those weights are not a science, okay? When you purchase a new marker, weigh it just to see. Just weigh it. Belinda's asking, would a kitchen scale work? I don't know what a kitchen scale is because I do not cook or do anything in the kitchen, but you just need it to be a scale that does grams and really fine weighing. So I just use a jewelry scale. I think this is like a $6 scale or something like that. Hi, Terry. Thank you. I'm so glad you're loving the class, and I'm so sorry for you being 35 minutes behind. You can definitely catch up. You did not miss anything crazy. You can even watch it at the end of the day. And again, I'm so sorry for that. Yes, it's a good idea to use a label maker, and you can add your measurements to either the cap or the bottom so that you'll have them always available. That's a great idea. Okay, so that is refilling with the old style bottle, but I just wanted to show you guys how to add ink with the new style bottle. So I'm going to do E00. Let's see here. Let's weigh this puppy, see what it is. I take the caps off. It's at 14.4, not too bad, but I'll drip a little bit of ink in again, just to show you guys. So I'm going to take the tweezers. I'm going to gently pull the tip out. And then we have the new style bottle with that really long nozzle. And so what you can do is put that nozzle all the way in. See how it just fits right in there. So you have less chance of making a mess. And I'm just gently squeezing it a couple times. I'm going to put my tip back in because you don't want to weigh it without the tip. And that put it up a little bit. It's at 14.3 now. Okay. So that is how you refill your markers. I feel like that's something that really makes people nervous, and it doesn't have to be scary. It's really not that scary, I promise. All right. So any questions about changing the tips, refilling the markers, the different styles of the markers? Which tip do you recommend pulling on the Copic sketch since they don't have the metal bracket? Lisa, if your sketch markers still have the broad tip, I would pull that out. If your sketch markers you've changed them, where did my marker go that I just changed? Oh, remember I put it over here to see if it would fill. Yeah. If your sketch marker broad tip, oh, this one didn't fill. I think I put it the wrong way. Has the fine tip, I would probably pull your super brush tip out because it's just a bit bigger and less dainty. Does it fit that well in all styles of the Copics? Yes, the new refill bottle will fit into all of the empty holes of all of the markers just as easily. Lindsay says, oh gosh, that's so easy. I was scared for nothing. Yeah, you're not the only one, Lindsay. Yeah, Allison says, great tip about weighing because I always feel like it's a guessing game. Exactly. Jacqueline says, how much should a sketch weigh? On page 16 of your handout, Jacqueline, I put the weight of all 3 markers and I recommended 14 grams. If both nibs are bone dry, will changing both nibs and refilling save the pen? Yes, yes, and yes. If your nibs have gone bone dry, you can try, before you change the nibs, try to rejuvenate them, tap a little bit of ink to the nib like I showed you that I did, and see if that helps. It might help for a short time and then they kind of go dry really quickly. In that case, change your nibs, but don't give up on your nibs right off. Don't give up on them right off. But yes, changing the nibs and refilling will save the pen. I'm just going to scroll up a little bit to see if I missed any questions. You're welcome, you guys. The weights are with the cap off, and that's what I said on the handout on page 16, you guys. Please make sure you guys are referring to your handout because a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into that handout. Trust me. Trust me, trust me. I posted on my personal Facebook page this week that every time I'm doing a big handout for a class like this one, I immediately get flashbacks to being in school and having to write reports, which I never liked. I was an okay student, but I wasn't a good student and I didn't enjoy being a student. So I get flashbacks of it and I procrastinate and drag my feet and, then scramble at the last minute to get it done. It's like kind of like pulling teeth, but then I'm happy when it's done because I know how happy you guys are and you love the handouts. But it is probably one of the hardest things of my job are the handouts. All right. Liz says, I found that one of my sketch markers has a hairline crack and I use Spellbinder's yellow tape and it has kept me from having to replace it so far. That is great to hear. I have seen quite a few rumbles in Facebook groups and online that sketch markers have been having some hairline cracks. I've never had that problem with my originals. I don't know what happened. I did have a store owner that talked to Copic at the trade show I was just at in Ohio, and she didn't really get many answers. So I know that that's frustrating. I would just make sure when you guys are purchasing new markers, you're checking them right when you get them. And if there's a problem, contact who you ordered them from. The new ink bottles are a huge game changer for saving space. Yes, they do take up less space. Changed all my Gen highly used markers from chisel to fine, and 5 of them did not fit. Pretty happy, but wondering why they didn't fit. I don't know, Cheryl. Did you make sure you have the right nibs? Again, remember that it needs to say Copic Sketch or Copic Classic, depending on what brand or which style Copic you have. I'm not sure. If you want to send me more information in an email on that, Cheryl, I can help maybe troubleshoot. Ruth, the holder for my markers is linked in my handout. It's from Our Gray Barn. And I share my storage on page 8 of the handout. So then let's just talk about, so I already talked to you guys why I like to use the square originals. So what other supplies will you need when you are coloring with alcohol-based markers? So you've invested in some really nice alcohol-based markers, and you want to make sure that you have the right supplies to work along with them. So you want to make sure, I'm assuming many of you are stampers. You like to do card making and stamping. So you want to make sure that you have an ink pad that works with alcohol-based markers. So the ink pad that I use literally every day of my life is the Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. Now, there are many, many companies that have their own alcohol marker friendly ink pad. So I'm not saying that the Lawn Fawn one is the be all end all, but this is just the one that I love and use every day. I do stock it in my online shop, although it is out of stock right now, but you can sign up for a stock notification. What's nice about this ink pad is it is alcohol marker friendly, but it also works with watercoloring. So if you did my Distress watercolor pencil class, you know I used this ink pad as well. And so this is pretty much my go-to to stamp anything that I'm going to color, whether I'm going to color with watercolors, whether I'm going to color with Copics, whether I'm going to color with colored pencils. I use this. Now, back in the day, when I first started coloring with Copics 20 years ago, the only ink pad on the market that worked with alcohol-based markers was the Memento Tuxedo Black. And it was great, it worked, but I never loved it. Memento Tuxedo Black isn't a true black ink. It kind of has a purple hue to it. And it also doesn't work with watercoloring. So I was always having to remember, especially back in the day when I was doing all of my own class kits, I would be like, oh, I got to stamp with this ink, and now I got to stamp with that ink if we were doing different techniques. So I just love to have one ink pad that works for it all. I will just mention, on the bottom of page 7, I kind of mingled in some Copic colored cards in the handout just to kind of make it a little bit more interesting and not so wordy. But this card in the right, you'll notice maybe that all the stamped lines of the scarecrow and the mouse and the leaves and the pumpkin, they're a bit softer. And that's because I used Lawn Fawn's Crunchy Leaf, which is a brown ink that works with alcohol-based markers, and it also works with watercoloring. So I really love having that option when you want to have a bit of a softer stamped line. And then there's also River Rock. And River Rock I use a lot for winter scenes, like a snowman. I like that maybe the snowman doesn't have such a harsh outline. It kind of fades back into the scenery. And so I really like River Rock. And then the last ink that Lawn Fawn has that works really well with alcohol-based markers is Jellyfish. And Jellyfish is kind of a good ink pad to use for no line coloring, so you don't want your line to show up that much, or it will also take on the property of the color that you're coloring it with. And this also works with alcohol-based markers and watercoloring. I will just let you guys know that I do use Jellyfish with my Copics. However, if I'm watercoloring a no line, I personally like to use my Distress Antique Linen. So I feel like I have to let you know that disclaimer so that you guys don't think I'm like fibbing. And so what's nice is Lawn Fawn has a mini cube set with all 4 of these colors. It's called Pottery Barn, and I do have that in stock in my online shop right now. But I have the full-size pads of these 3. And then I have the cube set of all 4. So just so you guys know, having the right tools helps make your creative life work better, right? And then we talk about paper, all right? So for paper, what I use and have used since day one, I've tried other things and gone back to, is the Nina Classic Crest Cover Solar White 80-pound Super Smooth. This is what I use all the time. If you've taken a class with me where you've gotten a kit from me, it's on Nina. Anything you see on my website, it's on Nina. There are a few instances where I have done some Copic coloring on Distress White Heavy Stock. That is 130-pound, very heavy, very bright white cardstock. And I'll use that. Let's say I die cut a strawberry. Like Lawn Fawn has a strawberry set, and it's not a stamped image, it's just a die cutted shape, but I want to add my own color to it. Or maybe I die cut alphabet letters that I want to color myself. I'll use Distress White Heavy Stock, and it does blend really, really nicely. It does take a little bit more ink because it is a very heavyweight cardstock. Distress White Heavy Stock is also my go-to for any ink blending. But the Nina Crest, Classic Crest Cover Solar White 80 Super Smooth is almost all I use. I know a lot of you guys love the 110 pound version. I personally only use 80 pound. Shari saw my paper storage for, I pre-cut my cardstock into 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And Shari saw my storage the other day. It is disheveled right now. But I just don't want to try to keep track of 80 pound versus 110 pound. I can feel the difference between the Distress White Heavy Stock because it's 130 pound. But I just like to use 80 pound. Just one and done. That's all I use. And again, that's just my personal preference. I will let you guys know I have some links here. In my online shop, I stock Lawn Fawn's white cardstock paper packs, and that is exactly Nina Classic Crest Cover. They're packaging that up to make it easier for stores to sell. And then I have a link to Simon Says Stamp, their Nina, and then Lawn Fawn, because their white 80 pound cardstock is the Nina Classic Crest. And another tip, because a ream of it can be pricey, checking with if you have a local printer in town, they might be able to get you a ream. I will tell you, if you go to a Walmart or a Target and you find a Nina Classic Crest cardstock that isn't at least $40, it's not the right kind. I can promise you, because it's there's many different kinds of paper out there for many different reasons. And if it's not around the $40 range for a ream, it probably is not available. And so Lisa was asking, is there a link for Nina in a ream? And I have not shared that, Lisa, because every time I have one for it, like on Amazon, it changes. Like Amazon will switch it and put in the wrong paper in the same link. And it makes me super nervous to have you guys order the wrong kind. I do think Simon Says Stamp carries the ream. So yeah, so you could use my Simon Says Stamp link and then search, and it would still be an affiliate link. Yeah, Aunt Crazy, which by the way, I love your YouTube handle name. She said, I have so many different kinds of paper, it is confusing. Exactly. It gets confusing. And so I like to try to keep it simplified so that I don't need to be confused. And I also really like, especially when I'm teaching, if I'm providing a kit, like in my art retreat, or in an in-person class, that we are all using the same kind of cardstock and that you're going to get the same results. Nicole mentioned she really likes the Accent Opaque 80 for coloring. It's cheaper than Nina and usually easier to find for me. That's a great suggestion. If that works for you, that's awesome. And keep in mind, like, if the cost of Nina is, problematic for you, you're just stamp and die cut your images off of that. Don't make your card bases out of it. I don't like to ink blend on Nina. I don't think it ink blends well at all. But don't cut your stitched rectangles out of it or any of that. Just use it for your stamped images. Yeah, Shari said I would trust a ream from somewhere that is not Amazon. Exactly. It just gets like they just change links on you. Like the links will stay the same, but they swipe in a different product, and it just makes me super nervous. Not to mention when you get it in the mail, it may be mangled. All right. Awesome. All right. I hope you guys are enjoying. I know it's a lot of information at once. Please know it's all in your handout. And please know all of this information is going to help you be a better colorer. Okay. I hope I'm not boring you guys. I hope that, you're finding it helpful. All right. And then again, at the bottom of page 8, I explain the storage of my markers. So that information is there. All right. All right. So then we talk about how to know what colors blend together. And I think this is another thing. I think refilling your Copics and how to know what colors to pick are like the two most worrisome things that I hear from you guys. And over the years, as I've been planning for this class, I've done many questionnaires where I've asked you guys, what do you want to learn more about? And 98% of the answers are how to blend better, how to know what colors to choose, and how to blend better. So let's talk about that. I'm going to take a sip of my iced coffee first. Actually, I'm looking. It's already 12:51. So I'm going to talk about this, and then we're going to break for lunch, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this more and demo a bit, okay? So don't feel like this will be it, what we talk about right now. All right. Good. Okay. So Copic markers, we'll talk about Copics, but then we'll talk about what blends together if you don't have Copics in a minute. But Copic markers have a lettering and a numbering system, okay? The lettering system is the color family, all right? And so the color family is helpful to know because if you're newer to coloring or you're struggling with coloring, if you stay within the color family, your blending will happen much easier, okay? So we have RV is red violet, R is red, YR is yellow red, Y is yellow. So in this instance, RV and R, well, let's just say if we did 2 RVs, those are going to blend really very easily, most likely. But then if we wanted to branch out a little bit, we could do an RV and an R, okay? Then we have YR and Y. So we could do a YR and an R or a YR and a Y, okay? So that's the color family. Then the numbers after the colors, and that's what I think starts to confuse us. And honestly, it's kind of our own fault. We call this one, this top marker right here, we call it YG17. But it's actually YG17, all right? And back in the olden days, I tried to break my habit of calling it 17 again in a class for it to be more helpful for you guys, but I couldn't. And now I'm 20 years in and it's going to be really hard to break the habit. So it's YG, a 1 and a 7. And then we have a YG and a 2 and a 3. And in our brains, we sometimes think because the 2-3 is a higher number as a whole than the 1-7, we think it might be darker. And that is not the case, okay? Because we're not looking at it as a 23. We're looking at it as a 2 and a 3 and a 1 and a 7. Okay, and that's why I used this color combo as an example, because again, you might think, oh, the higher number is the darker color, and it's not. The first number on the cap, all right, it represents the saturation of the color. So like the 0 is a high or most transparent, and the 9 gets a bit more muddy, all right? So a 1 is a bit more transparent than the 2. Now, then our second number is a 7 or a 3. And the second number represents the brightness. And this is where this switches this color around on us. The 3 is a brighter than a 7, okay? Because 0 is the light and 9 is the dark. All right? Now, all my years of teaching about Copics, I explain this to everybody, but then I also let you guys know that I don't want you to feel stressed about this. If this confuses you and you're like, saturation of color and brightness and muddiness and lightness and darkness, my brain hurts. Don't let this continue to confuse you. If this helps a light bulb go off, great. Keep that knowledge. But if you're still a little confused, stick with me, okay? So, how to choose colors that blend together. As a general rule of thumb, when you start to pick out markers that you want to easily blend, choose from the same color family. So like I was just saying to you, first stick with both RVs, right? Stick with that. If you want to branch out a little bit, you could do an RV and an R, but stick with the color family. Once you have your color family chosen, you want to choose numbers no more than 4 to 6 numbers apart. Now, that doesn't mean we're looking at 17 and 23. That means we're looking at 1 and 2 and 7 and 3. Okay? And again, this is all on page 9 that I'm going over. You're welcome, Doreen. So, for example, if I have R29, which is literally my most used red, one of my most used reds. I always have 2 of the most used colors because I do 2 color blending. But if I choose R29, all right, and I want to choose something to blend with R29, all right, I'm going to choose either R35, because now we have a 2 and a 3. That's only one number away. And we have a 9 and a 5. That's only 4 numbers away. Okay? Or I could choose R27. Again, the 7 and the 9 are near each other. Okay? I don't want to choose R22 to blend with R29 because the 9 and the 2 are very far from each other. So can you blend with it? Well, the answer is always possibly, because it's art. And maybe the blend isn't as smooth as we're used to, but maybe that's the look you want. So it doesn't mean you can never use these 2 colors together. Okay? Can we put a color in between these to then make it an easier blend? Of course, because now we're talking a 9 to a 5. Great. And then we're talking a 5 to a 2. Great. So you could put a third color in there to help blend from R29 to R22. All right? So that kind of makes sense. So if I start to scribble out some R29 and then I try to take my R22, it's just going to take a really long time to get rid of that line. And all that it's doing is pushing back to a really another harsh line. All right. But if I take my R29 and I take my R35, you can see right away it's starting to blend. So now if you hear anything in the background, this is Jack and Gus who are trying to play in the sunshine. Jack is being a bully, as he often does, because he just wants all of his brothers to play with him. And you can see how that's blending much nicer. Okay? So Shari, I'm seeing that you're helping Rita with the item number of Nina cardstock, and I'm not sure, I'm not following your, what you're helping her with, but the item number for the Nina cardstock that I use, oops, let me get that on camera, is 03249. Okay. But again, if you guys are talking about something else, disregard me because I was not paying attention. All right. Debbie says, this is awesome. I'm going to be a blending fool, experimenting. And I love that you said that, Debbie, about experimenting, because what I want to also tell you guys is, again, if all of this information is kind of just making your head explode, I will tell you, granted, I have been coloring for a long time, so I know my go-to colors that I like to blend together. And this is why, you guys, I created this new free printable for even people who don't take my classes, so that you guys can start to put down your own blends or blends that you do in my classes with me. If I do a different red combo, I mean, I almost always do R29, R35, but if I do a different red and you want to remember it, start filling this chart so you will have them to refer to, okay? And as you memorize them, you're not going to have to think about it. So if I'm teaching you how to color a brown bear in class, put that color combo in here. So 8 months down the road, if you get a brown bear stamp from another company, you can come back to this and refer to it and color the brown bear with the same colors, okay? Now, what I want to though mention is, even though I have this knowledge in my head, I do see your question about the numbers. Give me 1 second. But even though I have this knowledge in my head, I don't often put a whole lot of thought into this. This is good to know. This is good to refer to. This is good to help you if you're trying to get a starting off point. But I will be honest, in real Jen Shirkus land, when I am coloring here in my studio, I often have pieces of Nina cardstock that are just scraps or, pieces cut off. And this is what I tend to do off page. I test out blends to see what will work, okay, before I bring them onto my project. I'm always doing this. I'm not necessarily writing the numbers down, but I'm doing some scribbles and then trying to blend next to it. And we'll talk about this some more, because with especially the mermaid tail, it's BGs and YGs, but I've skipped, I'm kind of doing that crossing the wall of the color family a little bit, okay? Now, somebody just mentioned, let's see, I had a question. Let me just find it. Yeah. But then isn't the 7 and the 3 too far away in your YG sample on the screen? No, 7 and 3 is only 4 numbers. I said 4 to 6 numbers. Okay, I see what Shari was helping with. Thank you, Miss Shari. All right. So when we come back from break, we are going to start coloring. I know, again, it was a whole lot of chatty. It's so weird for me to have us not actually be working on something, but it was all really important information we had to go over, because if you don't have that foundation information, it might, things are not going to make sense as we start coloring. All right. So we are 5 minutes over 1 o'clock. So we are going to break for lunch, snack, bathroom break. We're going to come back at, oh wait, no, we have a whole nother hour. Oh my gosh, we have a whole nother hour, you guys. I'm so sorry. I was thinking it started at 10 a.m., but it started at 11 a.m. Just kidding. I have you for another hour. So we are going to dive into coloring. I'm so sorry. Anyways, I just felt like we went over so much that I was running over time. All right, so let's go ahead and take out our workbook pages. And I'm going to just take out the smaller of the hearts, okay? And again, these are workbook pages. These are yours. They're not meant to be pretty. If you're not coloring with the same colors that I'm coloring with, that's okay. I will tell you, you know, dark and light, and we will go from there. Okay. You're welcome, guys. Megan said, a lot of my favorite combos are from all the videos of Marker Geek, coloring Stamping Bella stamps when I first started coloring with Copics a couple years ago. That's great, Megan. Awesome. Let me turn off the microwave and put down my sangria. Well, hey, you could still have your sangria during the first session of class. It's all good. All right, so what we're going to do is something I want to show you, and I stress this in my classes all the time. And again, you can kind of, when we're working in these workbook pages, you can kind of watch first to kind of see what I'm going to do, and then do them in your workbook pages. And I highly recommend that you guys jot yourself notes all over your workbook pages. What makes sense to you? What notes do you want to remember? I don't know if Janice is watching live. I do know she signed up for the class. Joan Mowers, I did see her in the comments. Those are two people. There's many other people, but those are two people I remember that did take this class with me back a million years ago when I used to teach it at the store. And but Janice specifically, like, sent me pictures of her workbook just, you know, a year ago. And she had all these notes, all these little nuggets of things that she wanted to remember that made sense to her. So I really encourage you guys to make this workbook, you know, something that will benefit you to look back on when you're coloring in your own time, maybe, you know, not in a class with me. Okay. So the first thing that I want to mention, and this is with any alcohol-based markers, all right? When you're coloring with alcohol-based markers and you do multiple layers, the color is going to get darker and darker and darker. Let me grab my workbook. And I'm going to take it out of the sleeve. But so here is YG09, okay? And so this is one layer of the marker. This is two layers of the marker. And this is multiple layers of the marker, all right? So with just one marker, you can actually build up a shadow. So if you don't have blendable colors for maybe that specific color you want to use on a project, you can get a bit of a shadow with just one marker. And this is why I also do not color the whole image first with the light marker, for instance. I start with the darker color first because our human eye, if we saw color in this upper right-hand corner, we would want to just keep coloring over it, or at least my human eye would want to do that. So I always color dark, blend with the light, and then fill in with the light with one layer. And this is how I always color. have always colored and will always color. I know that there are people out there that color the whole image with a light marker and then they do the shadow and then they blend that shadow. I just personally don't like to do that because I tend to keep coloring over and over where there is already color. All right, so let's kind of demo a few of these things. I love it. Yes, I also sent you guys a pen so you can take notes all over your workbook pages, right? All right, so let's, I'm always just trying to find a good color that will show this on the screen. So I'm going to try with R35. So I'm choosing a red color. Again, you know, test it, play with it, see. But so let's just do one layer of R35. So I'm just going to fill this heart in. And if you haven't taken many classes with me online or followed me on my YouTube lives online, just know that I almost always color outside of the lines when I'm teaching. I'll actually share with you guys a fix for that. But I've only had iced coffee this morning, so I'm even more jittery. So just bear with me if I color outside of the lines. But this is a workbook, so it doesn't matter if I color outside of the lines, okay? All right. So now with that same R35 marker, I'm going to do one layer. And I'm really trying to make sure I keep it one layer so that this will show up better on screen. Okay, so that's one layer. And now I'm going to go over it again with a second layer. And in my studio, I can see that it's gotten darker. Looking at it on screen, it does look a bit darker. This is definitely something easier to see, you know, in real life. So hopefully you guys are doing this demonstration. And then on this third heart, I'm going to take the R35 and I'm just going to color the heck out of it. I'm going to just keep going over and over. If you're using a sketch or a super brush tip, you might get some bleeding outside of the lines, but that's okay. We're really just trying to be a bit exaggerating in the fact that we can get this to look darker and darker. Now, it's going to look pretty dark. And then once the alcohol evaporates, it is going to get a bit lighter. And that's something that you're just going to have to learn over time, that once that alcohol evaporates, the color is going to get a bit lighter over time. So I'm going to say this is R35, one layer, two layer, and then multiple layers. Okay. Liz says she colors outside of the lines and she's not teaching. That's so funny. Again, if you guys are missing something from a package, you can send me an email. It was a little bit crazy getting those packages out. I cut it a bit close in shipping time for the ones in the US because of my vacation time. So we were scrambling. So just send me an email. All right. So now if we want to blend with two markers, I'm going to stick with my reds and I'm going to use a dark red and kind of a medium red. So R29 and R35. This is my go-to red combo that I use if I'm going to use red. It's a nice warm red. I know like Shari loves to use, I think it's I think she uses R29, R24. So this is a bit more of an orangey red combo, but this is my favorite combo, R29, R35. And again, you'll find that on my favorite combo list. This is the combo I've been using for 20 years now. So what I mean is I am going to lay down my dark first. And I'm just looking. I'm going to lay down my dark first, and then I'm going to blend. So we're not going to talk about where to shadow just yet. We are going to talk about that later in class. But so I'm going to take my R29 and I'm just going to add some on the left side of this heart. Okay. And this is like, you guys can make your own Jen Cherkas coloring guide. Like when I make my coloring guides for all of my online classes, this is essentially what I do, you guys. I color each image 3 times to show you how I am getting my coloring done. So I did R29 on the left side of all 3 hearts. I was just talking about reds, Miss Shari. Nothing bad, just reds. Your go-to red combo is different than my go-to red combo. All right, so I'm gonna leave this first heart as it is so I can kind of see how I did my shadow first. And now I'm gonna take R35, and when we go to blend, I'm doing little dabs, little swipes in one little area. I'm going to zoom way in one little area until I don't see a line from the previous marker. So something that I see that happens a lot is people will just go like this and think that it's done, but I can still see the line from R29. The other thing that I'll see that people will do, let's say we're coloring this whole thing. I don't know what this thing is, but it's a big thing, okay? The other thing that I'll see people do is do this all the way down, all the way up, all the way down, all the way up. Well, what's happening when you blend that way is you go all the way down, and by the time you're down here, up here has evaporated and has dried. So it's taking more ink and more effort to do any of the blending. So when I am coloring something, again, we don't know what this is, but let's pretend it's something. When I'm coloring something, I stay in one same small area, little dabs, multiple times, saturating that cardstock so the 2 colors will blend together. And as soon as I don't see the line from the previous marker anymore, I move down or over or wherever to another small area. And then when I don't see the line, I move down. And then when I don't see the line, I move down. And then when I don't see the line, I move down. Much different than going all the way down and all the way up, because these are alcohol-based markers. They are going to evaporate quickly, okay? So little dabs in a little area until I don't see the line anymore. I'll work my way around wherever I put the shadow, but I'm not worried about coloring anywhere else on this heart. I have kept that upper right-hand side completely white. I'm only concentrating on the shadow, okay? So now that's step 2, all right? So here we did R29 shadow. Here we did R35 blend, okay? And then our third one, we're going to do R35 highlight. Now, to do that, we need to blend this first, just like we did in the second step. So let me get that done. Work my way around, little dabs, making sure I only move to another section if I don't see a line from the previous color anymore, okay? Cheryl's mentioning, make sure you put a blotter under your work. So you can see here, I've got, my tabletop is glass. So you can see I got some marker here from it going through. Having something under you when you're coloring, especially if you're using the super brush tip, it will help with overflowing your lines because it will absorb some of that. I don't tend to work on paper when I'm coloring, but that is a good tip if you're struggling with that. Now remember, I don't color with super brush tips very often, so I kind of forget that, but that's a good tip. Okay, so now that we have this blended out, I'm going to continue with my R35 because I tend to just color with two colors almost always. And with my R35, I'm going to fill in the rest of this heart with one layer of color. Okay, so we can already see how much brighter it is up here than where we did our blend. However, what we can also see is, I wish I had a pointer here. I'm gonna grab my paper piercer. What we can also see is we have a little bit of a harsh line right here, okay? And so if we want to soften that out, and then also reds, dark blues, dark purples are notoriously hard to blend. I don't know why I chose this as my first demo. They're tricky. They take some practice. But we also can see right here, we have a little bit of something that I call a pushback, okay? Where when we did our blending, some of the ink was getting pushed back, all right? So there's a way to smooth out. We've got 1, 2, 3 sections, and there's a way to smooth this out. Now, the first thing that I'm worried about or more concerned about is just this awkward line between the blend and the highlight. And what I do for that is continuing with my light marker, and I like to turn my paper. Remember, you guys can move your paper. You don't have to be looking at the object that you're coloring correctly. If holding your paper a different way will make it easier for you. But I turn my paper, and I think with a brush tip, this is easier, but you're going to take your brush tip and just flick it out. So I'm making this motion. And what that's doing is making an in-between color. So it's not the blended color of R29 and R35. It's just an in-between, okay? And that's how I'll fix that. Now, if I want to fix my pushback line, I'm going to go to my R29 marker, and I'm also going to just flick that out a little bit. Now, ideally, I would have done all of this together when I was coloring, and I wouldn't be talking a million minutes in between each layer, because what happens is the cardstock is still damp from coloring, so things tend to blend a little bit better when things are still damp. Okay. Question, when blending, do you stay right on the border or go into the shadow with the lighter color? You definitely go into the shadow. So let me just show you again. So if I take my R29, and here's my shadow, okay, of R29. And then I'm going to take my R35, and I'm literally going over the R29, dabbing, flicking, circles, whatever motion you guys want to do for this part is whatever you're comfortable with. Just be gentle with your tips. No matter what markers you're using, pressing harder is not going to get you faster results, okay? It's only going to ruin your tips. All right? So, like I said, I tend to like to shadow with two colors. There are times that I'll bring in a third color, and those times are if I am coloring something really, really large. It's helpful to have a third color just to kind of make that blend a little bit more seamless. If, excuse me, if I'm coloring something that is a hard color to use, like I said, dark reds, dark blues, dark purples, having a third color will also help make the blend easier. And then the time that I use a third color a lot in my classes, which a lot of my card classes are with Lawn Fawn, so they're smaller images. The reason why I'll bring a third color in is because I want that shadow to be a bit richer. I want it to be a bit more intense, okay? So a lot of the times, if I have a bigger area, I'll use 3 colors to blend, right? Having that BG32 in here is not a make or break, but it will make things a little bit easier if it's a bigger area. But if I want to really kind of deepen my shadow, I'll bring in a really, really dark color in that color family. So like I shared on the handout on page 10, I use this BG49 just a teeny bit. It's just going to be a thin line where the shadow is going to be. Okay? And that's it. That's BG49. Then I'll take BG13, which is going to be my real shadow color, and I'm going to go right over that BG49, thickening up that space a little bit so you can see how the shadow is becoming a bit thicker, but I'm going over the BG49 so that it mixes with the BG13, and it's just a really nice, rich, deeper shadow. Okay, so there's my shadow. I'm going to keep going with the BG13 because it's my dark. So I'm going to kind of flick some color out, almost like what we did up here with the R29, because we're done with that BG 49. And then I'm going to go in with my light. So BG 32 or BG 11. We're going to blend the edge, dab, dab, dab. It's all blended. And then I'll fill in with one layer. All right. So let me just quickly on this second heart show you what this heart would look like without the BG 49. And again, it's not something that I do all the time. It's just if I really want to kind of make that shadow a bit more intense, a bit more rich. See the difference? So here we're going to do, it's BG 49, BG 13, BG 32. And this is only BG 13 and BG 32. And this is another example, right, where the less number is actually darker. The 13 is darker than the 32. Is this making sense, you guys? Let me know in the comments if you have questions about blending. So so I always blend dark to light, okay? Again, I never put my light color down first. And then a few common mistakes I see happening with blending is like I mentioned, you're trying to blend too large of an area and you're going all the way down and all the way up. We want to work in little areas, saturating and moving our way down. And then the other mistake that I just see sometimes is you guys aren't blending enough. You're still seeing that line from your previous color, the shadow color, all right? So if you kind of look back at your coloring, just keep that in mind. And that's why, again, I think with this workbook, maybe when you're coloring something for a card, you're afraid to add too much ink. But maybe in this workbook, even with just these hearts, just sit here and color hearts, you guys. And I've said this in many of my classes, pick one stamp and just stamp it all over a sheet of cardstock and just practice blending. If you do want to practice blending, I highly recommend doing browns or like warm grays. Those are the easiest to blend together. And so it won't be fighting a hard color to blend. You'll be learning more about the blend and less about the fight. But this is what I mean about blending. All right. So the other thing I want to talk about is I'm going to grab my little page with the balloons. Okay. And the reason why I'm grabbing this page is we've got this empty space down here. And what I want you guys to do with the empty space is just to take a minute to get a feel for what kind of marks can you get with your style of marker. Now, again, you could have Copics, you could have another brand of alcohol-based markers, you could have super brush tips, you could have fine nibs, you could have, you know, the brush tips that I have on my originals. Whatever it is you have, I just want you to take a minute and get a sense of what type of marks can you get. So if I go with my little nib on my Copic original and I go with a really light hand, how thin of a line can I get? If I do a little bit more pressure, I get a thicker line. What kind of dots can I get? By just maybe pressing a little bit harder. Again, you don't want to mangle your tips, but just doing very light little dots gives me teeny tiny ones. Pressing a little bit more gives me bigger ones. If I try with my brush tip that's on my Copic originals, these I can get a really nice thin line if I'm very, very gentle. We've done this in some of my classes when we're doing wood grain, pulling towards yourself, pulling away from yourself. Again, dots, what can I get with these, with the brush tip? If I just kind of swirl my brush tip around, I can get bigger dots. Then if I have a super brush tip, which this is just another teal that I have, can I get similar lines as with my Copic brush tip, my original, and dots? Just get a feel of what types of marks can you get, right? And then also with, let's say you have a brush tip. It's okay if you don't, but let's say you have some sort of brush tip. Can you make that flick motion? Now this way I'm pulling away from myself. This way I'm pulling towards myself. Okay, if you don't have a brush tip and you only have a bullet tip, what kind of mark can you get by flicking your marker with that? Pulling away, pulling towards, you can still get a frayed end. Having these frayed ends will help blending a little bit easier, and we'll talk about that as we get going as well, but having that little bit of frayed end. Now, with a bullet tip, obviously we can color in circles and get a really nice saturation of cardstock. That cardstock's really wet, I can tell. If you're not sure if it's wet, flip your paper over, right? I can tell that's the wettest thing I've colored because it's bled through the most, okay? With my brush tip, what's it like coloring with circles with that, right? It's kind of a different feel. I've got that super brush tip kind of wanting to move a little bit. It's not bad. None of these are bad. It's just getting a feel for what kind of marks and motions can you do with your marker, okay? And the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because as you are coloring, sometimes having a frayed edge will make your blending happen a lot easier than having a lined edge. So if we go to shadow something and we just shadow it with a line like this, blending that edge is going to be a little bit harder than if we flick out our marker. Okay, and so I'm going to show you that with this first balloon here. I'm going to stick with my teals. I'm going to only use 2 teals. I'm going to use a BG13 and a BG11. But so with this balloon, if I wanted to shadow the left side, and again, we will talk about where I'm choosing shadowing later, but this is more just about blending. What I'm first going to do with my dark marker is I am going to do a little bit of a line on the edge. And this is just to help me so that I don't maybe go out of the lines. Okay. So I did a little line. And then, like I mentioned, I like to turn my paper to make it more convenient, more comfortable for me. So I'm going to continue with that BG13, and because I've got a fairly big balloon here, I'm going to extend out that shadow, but I am flicking my brush tip out. So we've got kind of a feathered edge, okay? So now I am going to take my light color, and in this instance, I'm going to use BG11. And I'm still going to do that kind of brush out motion, little dabs in one little area, half on the dark, half off. I kind of do wax on, wax off. And I'm going to work my way down my balloon. Now, let me get my pointer. See this? This is what I call pushback. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just working on the edge. I'm working on not seeing this part of the shadow. I'm not worrying about that pushback. I'm going to fix that in just a minute. And I'm going to keep going and talking you through it because, again, having the cardstock be damp from me wetting the paper is going to make things much easier to show you. So I just blended out with BG11. I'm going to stick with BG11 and I'm going to finish filling this balloon in one layer of color. Okay, so now let's first deal with this pushback. So I'm going to actually go back to my BG13 and I'm going to do those flick motions one more time. This is going to really darken the shadow, and that feathered edge is going to soften because it's going into damp cardstock. So it's not going to look as harsh as it did. All right. However, if you want to smooth it some more, you can go back to your BG11 and flick a little bit. All right. That's the other thing with alcohol-based markers. You guys can keep building your layers and you can keep going back and forth into different, your previous color, your first color, and really build up your layers. Now, when you are building up layers, just be aware of your cardstock and make sure that you're, not going to overflow your stamped line or your printed line. Also, letting things evaporate, especially when you're learning to color, things look a lot darker when they are wet. Okay, so like right here, let me grab my pointer. This section right here looks really dark, but I have a sneaking suspicion it's because it's just really wet. So I'm going to let this dry and see what happens and see what my balloon looks like once the alcohol evaporates and it's pretty dry. All right. Doreen says, mine is coming out terrible. The blending is getting washed out. So I'm not quite sure what that means, Doreen. I would first ask you, what kind of markers are you using? And if you are, oh, there we go. She's answering her own question. She says she sees what's happening. So that's good. But helping me know what markers you're using, what colors you're using, I also can help you. Hello, Elaine. I can't wait till you have some quiet time to be able to watch. Oh, it was the pushback that Doreen was having. Yeah, it's kind of, that's a genism. That's a gen term, pushback. I don't know if that's like a real, I don't think that's a real coloring term. I think it's something I've made up over the years to explain visually what you guys are seeing happen. All right. So I am going to go ahead and color another balloon. This time, actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to keep this guy here. So I'm looking at page 11 of the handout, you guys, just if you're following along on the handout. But looking at page 11, something else I want to talk about is when to use a blender, the 0, and, you know, when not to use the blender. Now, I actually almost never use this marker, ever. I actually went to go use it like the other day, and I actually had to put more ink in it because I just think it was like dry from just sitting in my cart for so many years not being used. The colorless blender formula of ink, and I don't know that this is like true by science, but the colorless blender it just acts differently than even our lightest colors. Now, if you've taken classes with me, you guys know I use this BG0000 a lot because there's 4 zeros. This is a very, very light color, almost white color, okay? And using this BG color versus this colorless blender is so much more user friendly. All right. Using this 0 is just so harsh, and it honestly makes more problems than solutions. And again, this is my opinion. A lot of the times when I took the Copic certification training, they taught us that if we had anything go out of the lines, any ink go out of the lines when we were coloring, to use the colorless blender and push the colorless blender towards where it went out of the lines. And that's going to take the color away and kind of push the color back to where it's supposed to be. And when I do this, then it starts to bleed over into my image and it just becomes a mess. I don't like it. So what I've started to do instead, and I've shared this with you guys in classes, is I just use a Sakura Jelly Roll pen. And I will just take that gel pen and color over wherever I went out of the lines, and that's going to clean it up and make it nice. Now, if we're going to color something like I colored my mermaid, let me find my mermaid, right? If I colored my mermaid and I went out of the lines coloring the tail, I am not going to use the white gel pen because I'm going to be coloring my water later. And the watercolor is going to clean up the edges wherever I might have gone out of the lines with my tail colors. Okay, so you only want to use that white gel pen as a final thing, and if there's going to only be white edges. Okay, so I don't use my blender to fix mistakes. I also think it's deceiving that they call it a blender. Copic will teach you that you can kind of take the blender and blend some out on your cardstock and then go in with your marker and color over it, and it's like lighter and blah blah. I just have never been good with it. So this is truth bombs here. It's just never been my jam. So what I do use the blender for, or the blending solution for, okay, is for textures. So on our balloon here, I can use my blender and I could do gently little repetitive dots or lines or what have you. And it's going to take the color away and add some polka dots or lines or highlights or whatever it is you want to draw on your image. You could do that. So I do repetitive dots, not pressing hard with my tip. If you press hard, you're just going to ruin your tip. You're not going to get faster results. Okay? So I can do something like this. However, what I usually do is I grab a lighter color from that color family, and that is how I make my highlights on an image. So I'm using this BG10 over where I colored BG13 repetitively but gently until I get the look that I want. And because it's the same color family, I just find that it's a little less harsh. And so that's what I tend to do more so than use the blender pen. Okay. Now let me color another balloon so I can show you what I use the blending solution for, which is something that I do use more than the pen. So I'm just going to color this next balloon pink. I'm going to use RV14 and RV13. Same way that we just colored the teal balloon. I'm going to flick some color out with RV14. And now I'm using RV13. I'm blending the edge. Once the edge is blended, I'm going to fill in with one layer of RV13. Any harsh lines I'll flick out in between to soften them. I'm going to jump back to my RV14 to fix up any pushback. This is looking pretty good. And I'm going to call it done. Okay. So now what you can do with the refill bottle of your blender marker, and again, I put it in the handout, but it's no longer offered in this large bottle that I could find online. It's just in the new refill bottle. But what you can do is, like, I have a piece of old jeans, I just cut a square off. Chris always has like jeans with a hole in them. So the other day I was like, can I have those? He's like, why? I'm like, I need them. And then I literally just cut this piece off and he's like, that's all you're doing with them? I'm like, yeah. So I'm going to just put a little bit of blending solution on the jeans. You can see that it's wet. And I actually want it to evaporate a little bit because it's a little wet. And that's why actually having the smaller bottle is nice because you use less. But then I'm just going to take this blending solution. I'm going to press it on the balloon. And I'm going to lift it up. And you can see that I got kind of some fun texture. Now this is all wet on the outside of the balloon. That's going to evaporate. You're not going to see that. I went out of the lines over here. I'm going to fix that up with my white gel pen. Nobody will ever know. Just you guys. And so that's a really fun thing. And we are going to do that later when we color with our bear. Okay. So I don't really use my colorless blender 0 marker, but I do sometimes like to use the refill. And that's why you'll see on my new list of colors, I don't even list that 0 anymore. I do list a W0 and a T0, but I don't even list the 0 anymore like I used to because I just don't use it. All right. So the other thing, actually, I think we're going to pause there. So we're going to talk a little bit about, when we come back from break, we're going to talk about the power of grays, and a little bit more about like blending and dotting and things like that. But any last minute questions before we break for lunch? Doreen says she's going to cut up her husband's jeans on break. Now, what I was going to just do is just cut his back pocket off. But he was like, no, you can just have these whole jeans. But yes, you can use this over and over. The alcohol's going to evaporate, but it's not going to ruin it. I mean, maybe over time it might kind of degrade. But yeah, I'll just keep this. And so you could have a little patch of this. You could have a little patch of maybe a washcloth. You can try paper towels that have the indented pattern to them. You could try that as well. Yeah, Joni just said she just used a paper towel. That's awesome. Everybody's going to cut up jeans over lunch break. I love it. So funny, so funny. But you can try different types of fabrics, tweed, burlap. I don't know, try anything. I think my flower sackcloth is a little too smooth, which is one of the reasons why I like it, that it doesn't leave texture behind. But try it. Try anything. Remember, this is a workbook. This is for you to experiment. If we're kind of on that trend of writing our notes, this is texture with 0 marker, texture with BG10. And then this is BG13 and BG11. And then this is texture with jeans and 0 refill. And this was RV13 and RV14. Emmeline hopes she has jeans she can cut off. Question, this makes it flammable? ? Cheryl, the ink, when it's being mailed and stuff, is flammable. My understanding is that once the alcohol evaporates into the air, this isn't as flammable. I mean, it's paper, so it will burn. But I hope I'm answering that question correctly. Again, I'm not 100% sure from a science standpoint. Megan said she took a Skillshare class on Copics and the teacher went on a rant that the colorless blender might as well be watered down bleach or something. Maybe not to that extreme, but is there any truth to that? I don't think it's watered down bleach, but the way you actually just reminded me of a way I used to explain it in the many years ago is, to me, a blender pen acts very much kind of like a spot remover, like a Tide pen on your shirt. Where you're trying to take a stain away. It's just a harsher formula. I do want to point out that this colorless blender is not the same as the alcohol blending solution from Ranger. However, because I just talked about alcohol blending solution from Ranger, I will tell you that with your Copic refills, you can do a lot of the same techniques with this ink as you can with alcohol ink, because this is alcohol ink, right? So you can work with these on Yupo and on non-porous surfaces. They will act a little different than like Ranger alcohol ink, but you can do some really fun things with it. Let's see. Would coloring over the cloth with a colorless blender pen work, or it won't saturate it enough? Lindsay, I don't think it's going to saturate it enough. Maybe you could try to use your broad tip. I wouldn't use the fine tip because it'll probably rough it up a bit, but I don't think it's going to saturate it enough. Is there something we can use instead of the blending solution? To make a texture like this? No. Would straight alcohol work? I don't believe isopropyl alcohol will work. You could try it. I could try it real quick. Let me just color something really dark, out of the lines, wild and crazy. Okay. The only thing is I don't want to use the same jeans because it's still wet with blending solution. 1 second. I got more jeans. So this is my isopropyl alcohol that I clean my stencils with. I just did a quick BG09. You do get some texture from rubbing alcohol. So Eliza, you could use rubbing alcohol. I can tell it is a bit more blurred, but there you go. So this is rubbing alcohol. At first I said no, but then I realized that like this rubbing alcohol will take the Copic off my glass. So that's why I was like, oh wait, I'm probably not saying the right thing. My ink bled all over with that technique. Did I use too much? Yeah, you probably just had too much alcohol on your fabric. So that's why I was kind of like flapping it to just make it more like damp to the touch. Desperate and just use the inside of a pair of jean shorts of mine. We'll let them air dry, then wash. Yay! Someone just got their first decent blend. I love to see that. Yeah, Megan says she's always shocked to see alcohol ink artists use the Copic ink instead of other brands. I don't think my isopropyl alcohol is 90%. I'll look during lunch break. I think it's only 70%, but not sure. Awesome, awesome. Off-topic question, what paper do you use for ink blending with your ink pads like Distress Regulars? I mentioned that earlier. I use Distress White Heavy Stock that I carry in my shop. It's 130 pound, really nice bright white, and I get really beautiful blends on it. All right, so it is now break. We are now ready to break. stretch your legs, grab that sangria again, go to the bathroom, grab a bite to eat. We will come back in an hour. You are going to go back to the resource page on my website, log into your account. The second session link is clickable now. I fixed that. Again, I am so sorry about the confusion this morning. I can assure you there was good information this morning, but nothing that's detrimental for this afternoon session. So you can always watch the beginning of the first session again later or during break. Again, my apologies for that. I've been doing these unlisted YouTube videos for a long time now, and they've just been working. And so I didn't even think that people were struggling to get in, and I apologize. That was totally my fault. Are you using to eliminate that harsh line, the lighter of the colors? Jenny, I'm not sure what that question means. Sandra says, get your steps in if you're in the Step Bet Challenge. Today is my rest day. I did both my power days already, so tomorrow will be my last regular day. So I made it so today was my rest day. So, but yes, get your steps in. If you're part of my Step Bet Challenge, you can still join. We're almost at 100 people. But yes, awesome. All right, you guys, I will see you in an hour, 3 p.m. Eastern time, 59 minutes actually. Remember, it's a new link. It's the second link on the class resource page that is now clickable. So go right back to the class resource page and you will